Hello, my name is Eric Schoones, and I'm very happy to start this series of conversations on the topic of Zen and music making. And I'm very honored and proud to do this first episode together with my dear friend Sasha Gavrylyuk. Welcome, Sasha.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Welcome on the show, as they say on television. Well, I think we know each other now for about 6 or 7 years, and I still remember very well the first time we met and you played second Rachmaninoff concerto in Maastricht. It was, and I still remember I was standing outside of the square of this beautiful square in the Vrijthof in Maastricht, and I was simply crying when I was talking to my wife. Said something really amazing happened, and ever since, every time I heard you play live in concert, there was a miracle. So I'm really
happy so much.
we can do this together, and because for me you really capture this idea of what we will try to talk about.
It's a very mutual feeling, Eric, because your book is the biggest inspiration, you know, and having discussed in the past the subjects which are so enlightening about Zen and about music and about so many different reflections of it. For me, it's absolutely invaluable, you know, so I will always be very grateful for it.
Okay, well, that's a feeling we share, I guess. But perhaps we should say a few words about why this connection between Zen and music. I was just recently got to know a Japanese pianist, a really wonderful young pianist, and she said, oh, I was always thinking about how this connects Zen and music, and that's somebody from Japan who really has this, was really raised in this Buddhist culture. So I think what you also said, that when you combine the teaching of the great masters of the East and the great masters of Western music, then you can really start to understand basically what music is about.
Of course, it's such a huge, monumental question that we will keep asking ourselves, and we can probably come slightly closer to the answer, but perhaps we will never really find the full spectrum because it is just so deep, and it is so universal as well. I think I feel that you know, the notion of selflessness in the Zen teachings, and the notion of absolute harmony, the perfect balance. You know, those sort of general foundations can apply to both music and you know, those forms of thought and meditation and forms of you know, mental state as well.
But that's very true, because what you just said, that we will never find it. That is, a lot of musicians, they express these Zen ideas. They're like Yehudi Menuhin, who said searching and the way are more important than actually finding something. And Kirsta Ludwig also said that when you have searched all your life, you discover that the search is the goal, and not, there is no goal. This is the process, and that is a very similar idea for a musician, that you keep on searching and developing all the time.
Completely, and you know, one can compare it to nature. You know, one can discover so many sights, so many beautiful reflections of nature, and you know, how can we possibly have a goal, one goal behind discovering nature? There are so many. There are new, you know, absolutely countless reflections of nature that we can keep rediscovering and keep being inspired and amazed by. The music is the same. You know, there cannot be one answer. There cannot be one goal behind the search. There cannot be only one final step to take. The beauty, I think, is precisely in the process and in its endlessness. You know, the idea that we are so much smaller than that world that we are discovering. So we cannot discover all of it, but we can definitely come closer or further from the essence of it, I think. Interestingly enough, in my personal experience, the selflessness plays a big role in coming closer to the essence of this magic, which is quite the contrary to most education systems, which teach you to control everything and to be in full control and full, grasp, so to speak, of the interpretation. But I find it's exactly the opposite. So, allowing the music to be the leader, and for us to simply not to get in the way, and to allow to allow the music to speak its truth, to speak its natural flow. That's the best we can do, I think.
Yeah, I was always so fascinated by the story you told me when you had to step in for Marta Argerich in Warsaw with Prokofiev number 3. Could you tell that, because it's a lovely anecdote, but it really touches upon the basic things in meditation, what you just said also.
It's really true. I was in a way a little bit surprised, and that experience really showed me, from a real life experience, how true this can be. And so the idea was that we had finally booked a holiday. It was a family holiday. My wife and I, we took my parents and we went driving around Europe. And so it was a 2-week trip. So 2 weeks I didn't touch the piano, and we were just having the best time of our lives, to be honest. And we at some point ended up in Croatia. And then, yes, my agent from Poland, Isabella Dargiel, she called and she says, "Oh, there is an urgent situation. Can you come today? Can you come to Warsaw today?" And Zoki received the call, and we just arrived to Croatia, and I just changed into my swimmers to go for a swim. And just as I walked towards the sea, Zoki ran to me with the phone. And she says, "Oh, there's someone calling." So I spoke to Isabella, and she said, "There has been a cancellation. Can you please come?" I said, "I would love to, of course," which was a little bit difficult because I did not have any concert suits with me or anything. So we had to find some shops in this small Croatian town. And the only thing I managed to find was a black shirt.
Okay.
Which I bought, and I went on the flight, boarded the flight, which landed me in Warsaw late in the evening. And the next morning we had the rehearsal and the concert in the evening. So there was only basically less than 24 hours before the performance.
Yeah. And you hadn't played it for a long time, or?
I haven't played it it was a Prokofiev third. I haven't played it for quite a long time. So it was a bit of a challenge. So I came to the Philharmonie, and of course I went straight to practicing. The idea was just to get the basics, just to remember the notes. So I was fortunate enough that there was a music score there, and I was able to go through the concerto just to remember the notes. And so I spent about 3 hours there at the Philharmonie. It was getting very late, and the next morning I came back for a general rehearsal. And to be honest, I was very nervous because there was nowhere near enough time to really prepare properly, or to prepare the way I was used to preparing until then. So I came to the general rehearsal. I was terrified, but luckily I didn't forget any notes and managed to play the whole. And by the evening, the feeling was so strange because it was a little bit surreal, having not really practiced and having not really, solidified all the notes of the concerto in my system. It was almost a feeling of freedom, because I was in this strange situation, a feeling where I cannot change anything and the situation is just happening. All I have to do is just go along with it. in a way, it was a strangely liberating feeling, you know, unlike my expectations, which I thought I will just feel very stiff and nervous, but I didn't. I came on stage and I just said, well, whatever happens, happen. And to be honest, it was one of my better concerts, completely unexpectedly. Basically what happened, I had no choice but to give in to the situation, to give in to the music, and to simply surrender.
Yeah, that's what you said, that because you had played it before, and then you had the habit to practice it, like playing every phrase from different angles and exploring every note and seeing how it could be done. So everything was more or less fixed in your mind, and now it was all open, and you just had to surrender to. And that is a striking coincidence with what Lipatti writes in his letter. You know, for me, that is the most important thing ever written on music. It's a half page text where he explains how he practiced, how he studies. And there's a phase. It's in 3 phases. The first phase is you get a mental image of how it should sound, of course, like a painter seeing the picture before him before you put your brush on the canvas. And then the second phase is that you practice everything like you did in Warsaw, everything from a mechanical point of view, without, that's what Lipatti writes, without injecting any sentiment to it, just only playing the notes. And then in the third phase, then there comes this magical moment when the craftsman, Lipatti calls himself a craftsman, this craftsman is joined with the artist full of life, and then he says it so beautifully that you discover a new freedom of expression. And that is something I find it so beautiful that you experience that yourself in this that moment there in Warsaw.
I absolutely 100% agree with this, and this was precisely my experience. I was put in that situation, so in a way I was fortunate to experience this. Otherwise, I probably would have never really understood it to the full extent, because one thing is to understand it in theory, another is to really feel it. And the feeling on stage, Eric, was very, very liberating. It was really music leading the way forward, and I simply tried to be a good connection point so that I deliver all that music wanted to say. And of course, I could deliver only a portion of it due to my human limits. But the fact that I did not condition myself by over practicing, the fact that I didn't condition myself simply because I didn't have time to do so, allowed for the music to take the lead. And that was a moment of revelation for me, really. Since that moment, I completely changed my approach to preparations, you know, and actually I ended up much less time in the piano room since then.
We just listened to part of Prokofiev's third piano concerto, the actual performance in Warsaw Alexander was talking about, and that proved so revealing to him in terms of how to prepare for a concert. Now we return to our conversation to the concept of selflessness we talked about earlier in connection to Dino Lipatti, and you can read Lipatti's advice at the end of this video. Another major influence for Alexander Gavrylyuk was the great Russian actor and director Constantine Stanislavski.
Yes, that's true. Stanislavski wrote a book called My Life in Art. And I read that book when I was about 18 years old. This was just when I was preparing for the Rubinstein competition, 2005. And I must say that that book completely changed, my outlook on music and my relationship, because he had a very special path of finding the artistic truth on stage, on the theater stage. And, he discovered that complete selflessness, complete lack of effort and lack of artificial way of acting, artificial interpretation, a controlling kind of mindset. Lack of that allowed him to completely transform into every character on stage. So people who came to the theater, they really saw a completely different person every single time, and people were amazed that every single time they could not at all recognize him, because it would take him let's say 2 weeks to figure out the walking pattern of that person. Why was that person walking that way? What happened in that person's life to make that person walk in that particular way? Why would that person swing his hands a certain way? What psychological reasons could there be behind it? And so on. And then it took him a long time to think about the face expression and the way that the face would be when it's relaxed, the way that the face would be when conversing with another person, and so on and so on. So it would
he really got under the skin of the character he was supposed to play, and that coincides with what Leonard Bernstein and other people said. Then you have to become Mozart when you conduct a Mozart.
Yeah, precisely. And so I thought, well, isn't it the same in music? And so trying to understand, after all, those compositions were composed by people, even though they were
hard to believe that sometimes.
Yes, it's hard to believe it. Well, in fact, a lot of the composers themselves did not believe it. For example, Mozart would say that I did not compose it. I simply had to write down what was already given to me. I just come to the window, look out, and the whole, composition.
Yeah.
Be careful enough to write out correctly, And he wasn't alone in this kind of reflections. And so I think, yes, it would be important to understand how those composers, with their prism through which they composed, how would they be the right kind of prism for the inspiration they got, and to be able to get under the skin of that particular composer, to get the biggest, the fullest possible idea about the environment in which it was composed, to try to feel what it felt like when it was being composed, I found that kind of that process was very similar to what Stanislavski experienced, and what he created. And so you kind of lose yourself in it, and you try to really become that prism through which it was composed. And even though the composers themselves were genius and selfless when they said that actually it wasn't really me composing, which actually tells us a lot as well about selflessness.
Yeah. And do you think? And do you think there's a parallel between what Lipatti wrote, his idea of interpretation, and
Absolutely. I think there is a pattern for example, on a physical level, on a motor level, you know, if we think about how our bodies work, you know, do we calculate how our body move? Do we really have to think about every single movement of our hands, of our legs? If, for example, we're walking on the street and there's suddenly a gap that we didn't see, we will jump over it. Will we really have time to think how do we have to jump, how we have to push off the ground to not fall into that? No, we don't. And it's the same concept, I think, in all these other areas. We just have to really trust and to be able to let go of the control, because the answers are already there. We just have to not to interfere with overthinking and over creating unnecessary barriers in front, you know. I really feel strongly about this, and I think there's enough evidence on so many levels about this.
Yeah, but you know very well that you, in order to be so free that you can really play like you are walking on the street, that you really have to prepare for a long, long time and study and practice, and there's nobody who practices like you, like a maniac, if I may say. so you're really, that's something you just can't, you cannot say, oh, I am selfless and I have left my ego behind me and I can play anything. That's not the way.
Yes. One can afford to only do that after many years of, you know, of course, you know, it sounds sounds really easy, but you're right. You know, only after thousands and thousands of hours of building up your motor skills, building up those, you know, like an athlete would build up his or her physical skills, and then when it comes to the race, all that matters is the mental state, because the body already knows what to do, you know. And it's the same with this. I mean, it's the same motor skills which we learn, we solidify, and then we have to let go and allow for the music to take over, you know. But yes, those additional thousands of hours of preparation, extreme discipline and hard work, without it, nothing else is possible.
And there, of course, often the ego is in the way, because when you are an artist, so to speak, then you feel yourself perhaps a little superior. I don't know, but there are not so many people who can really find this selflessness and therefore become a truly great artist.
Well, I think it's difficult, you know, in the industry. Everything is set up, well, in fact, in our society, in fact, everything is set up in such a hierarchical way that it's very difficult to be selfless, you know. It's we are being judged, we're being evaluated, we're being constantly compared to one another, and so all those things build up a certain mindset which limits and conditions you, you know. And so the more we can see outside this box that we're automatically sort of placed into, the more we can be outside of that box and really see the bigger picture, and to actually think a very simple thought: why am I in music? Well, am I trying to prove anything? Am I trying to achieve beauty of the music, or am I trying to allow the music to speak and to be part of the process, and to just enjoy that harmony and the notion of Zen as a result? You know, if we can manage to become that free, then I think the music starts suddenly speaking its you know, its real value. It's a wonderful place to be when you have the years and years of meticulous practicing and hours every single day of repetitive motor exercises and whatnot, and to be in a place where you have the repertoire, you have the motor abilities, and all of that is in place, and so you can just really allow yourself to give in, finally to give in to music, and to allow the music to take over, and not to realize that actually the lack of control is much better, or the mindset of the lack of control is much better. But for myself, I would be worried if I felt that I'm fully at the destination, because there is no destination.
No.
It's a misconception, it's an illusion. And, you know, if one fixes too much on some kind of illusion-based final destination in music, it's the wrong way, you know, because there is no final.
No, and you keep on practicing, of course, and developing also as a person, because when you are 60, play in a different way from when you were 20.
Yeah, precisely. And so it's a never-ending process, and that's the beauty of it, really. You know, we're merely you know, ones that try to grasp as much as we can, but it's a huge space to grasp.
Yeah. Well, that's a good thought to end our conversation, because that is really very wise of you to say that. And thank you very much, Sasha.
Thank you so much.
We will have lots of interactions like this in the future, but thank you.
Looking forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.